I'm Heather Morgan with Salesfolk and Sales for Startup, talking today with Jeff Hoffman, who is a sales trainer and sales consultant who teaches MBA students and entrepreneurs at Sloan and many other places on how to be better sales professionals. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
Great. Thanks for talking with us today. So,
Absolutely.
my first question for you is around cold emailing. Where do you think the future of cold emailing is heading?
Well, it's definitely changing. When you think about email in the beginning from a sales perspective 15 years ago, the inbox wasn't nearly as cluttered as it is today. But if you add to the clutter of the inbox the way that different organizations use folks like Gmail and others to kind of filter the inbox into different tabs, you think about people using their smartphone about 80% of the time to access email, and that smartphone gives you such a small real estate to read an email. Clearly how reps use email has got to be even more surgical than before. And I think the days of crafting, clever cut and paste emails that you're going to send out to hundreds, if not thousands of prospects, that's probably done now. So you're going to have to be far more targeted in the use of it.
I'm kind of curious. Obviously, you can't just send the same crappy canned email, but do you advocate using custom inserts with like personalized fields, or do you prefer just like one-on-one?
I prefer the latter. What I always coach people on is that your customer and your prospect is smart,
Mm-hmm.
and your customer and prospect has read a lot of emails. So you are not going to be able to craft any kind of cut and pasted sentence, paragraph, or elevator pitch or email that doesn't look cut and pasted. So what I always say is, if you're okay with that, if you're okay if the reader knows it's cut and pasted, then do it. But if you want to get an actual personal response, I'd argue you'd have to craft it originally organically. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that does cut down on your speed. But when you start looking at conversion rates that are less than 1%, I don't know how much speed helps you
Definitely.
anyway.
So, what would you say though if someone could write email templates that got like 20% response rates though, that were maths, but like very customized maths?
I would say that's pretty extraordinary. Industry standard for response rates to the C-suite or the
Mm-hmm.
VP levels of enterprise sales hovers in the single digits, generally
Yeah.
between 4 and 8% response rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think 20% is a very good goal for someone in sales or an entrepreneur to have. But let's be careful. When you see 20% conversion, that's conversion into a pipeline opportunity. We
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want to count a negative response or an open or a click-through as an actual conversion.
Yeah, definitely. So, it's kind of interesting that you say that. So, I actually do email consulting, and I've written emails that have gotten 20% before. Those are kind of rare, and you need a very targeted list, and you also need a lot of data pending on that, right? Like it can't just be hi first name. You need like an Odesk or someone doing the actual research to craft one custom sentence in there basically that's very relevant and targeted. But yeah. So I've seen some luck with it. I think I definitely agree with you though that people need to spend the time. I think that you can't just say hi first name company name, but at the same time, not everyone's going to be a fit, and so the amount of time it takes to qualify all of those, it can be really hard to write each one of those one at a time.
It can be, and I think it's important then that you're very specific and you're very targeted with what your message is. At the end of the day, though, cold calling through email, I think the aesthetic probably outweighs the content. The look and feel of that
Mm-hmm.
email, its size, its close, its subject line, your signature line, all those
Mm-hmm.
things probably impact the conversion
Yeah,
greater than any perfect message you're going to craft, because at the end of the day, you're still creating a message based on what you think that person wants to hear. You've never spoken to this person before.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, I think the aesthetic is pretty critical.
So, so you don't mean like I obviously the signature aesthetic I get, and you don't want like huge paragraphs that are chunks. But beyond that, do you actually mean putting HTML into emails, or?
No, not necessarily, not necessarily. But I do mean that in addition, the classic thing is sometimes a CEO or an entrepreneur or someone at a startup won't recognize little things like um, the use of your logo, your company logo, in your signature line. Depending on what the phone is that the person's reading it on, that might become as an
Yeah.
attachment, and as an
Yeah.
attachment, it might get blocked by a spam filter.
Yeah.
So I think it matters. I think the subject line, you're only going to get about 15 characters in a subject line is probably all anyone's going to see when it's truncated on a smartphone.
Yeah.
So what are you going to say in 15 letters? It has to be more focused than it has to be descriptive.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. And like the shorter, the better. With everything,
No question.
even if you can get your cold email down to like 2 sentences that are highly targeted and highly relevant, that's amazing. I would probably suggest never going above like 5 sentences for the most part too.
Yeah, I've always said if you're going to write an email to someone you don't know, it better fit on that screen of a smartphone. And I think 3-4
Yeah.
sentences is probably all you got.
Definitely. Well, so my next question is, what is the best or the worst cold email? Probably let's start with the best cold email that you've seen or written, and why.
Well, I love when people are personal. The salesperson
Mm-hmm.
is personal and vulnerable themselves. So, it's one thing. I'm not a big fan of a sales rep or someone who's sending out an email saying, "Hey, I just saw, this following thing going on in your company. That's great." Well, your editorial, that's great. It's kind of superfluous, and I'd argue sounds a little salesy and probably not appropriate. But when the rep is taking on the role of student and the rep is admitting a vulnerability, like saying, "Hey, guys, I read this in your 10K filing and I don't understand it,"
Mm-hmm.
those get better responses and they get better engagement. So I think whenever you're a little more vulnerable and a little more in that student and more inquiring instead of "I understand that you X," and saying, "Look, I don't know anything about you. I read this and I don't get this. I think it's like Y." I think that's far more powerful.
No, you're absolutely right. And actually, those are some of the kinds of email templates that I've written that have the highest response rate. The ones where you're asking a question about their business, and not like a stupid question like, what does your business do? But like a very carefully thought question that shows that you care, that you're interested in some kind of like intelligence even in how you're asking it.
Yeah. I mean, always the key with questions is it has to come from a place of curiosity. If you really care what the answer is, it's probably a good question. And if you just asking the question to sound smart, they'll know it.
Yeah, for sure. That's so true. Okay, interesting. So, what are some of the worst cold emails that you've seen?
I've seen a lot of those. The ones that I think are the ones that really strike me as really a bad idea are ones that have either lists or bullets to define, here are the 3, 4, 5, 10 reasons we should talk.
Mm-hmm.
There's something so incredibly unoriginal and uninteresting about someone who's going to want to approach me to speak in bullets or in highlighted moments. I'm also not a big fan of emails that have a lot of declarations of want. Like, I would love to meet with you. I would love to have coffee with you. I would love to have meet you for lunch. Hey, look, what you would love to do is wonderful, but it's probably not going to disrupt my schedule just because you want to do it.
Where's the value?
It's going to be something in it for me, and your want is not really of interest to me right now.
Exactly. Yeah, God, that's such a good point. I've just been having several conversations about that this week. I think people often miss the fact that the person you're sending to doesn't really care. They don't care that your business is awesome, that you want this or that, or that you can. It's all about, like, where's their incentive to take that 10 minutes or more out of their day to interact with you. Like, and even the whole idea of like, I'd love to hear your feedback. That's not enough. That's starting
Nope.
to be in the direction of student, but it's like, that's like, oh, cool, nice. Like, you'd love it?
No,
Great.
yeah.
So what?
Yeah, you got to own it. You got to instead of saying you're right. I mean, say like, "I love to hear your feedback." That's a very soft, neutral way of what do I care? Why do I need to indulge you with my opinion? It's much more powerful to say, "Look, I am confused. I don't understand. I think that organizations like yours are a good fit for my company, but I can't be sure about that. I'm new, or we're a new startup, or this is a new offering, and I've never spoken to you before."
Yeah.
But I saw on your website you do some things that I have questions about. I think it's far better.
Yeah, that's really great. So, beyond the topic of cold email, what do you think are some aspects that salespeople should be focusing on to really become masters of sales? Maybe even just like one for starters.
Yeah, I would say, and if there's many, but in addition to prospecting, really understanding the power of crafting a dynamite focused close. The art science is one that's been lost, I think, on a lot of sales reps, and how critical that is. That orders and cell phone numbers and calendar appointments and org charts and NDAs, they don't just arrive. They don't just appear. If you want to make it done quickly, you need to ask for it. The expression I use a lot is, sales is not about giving people choices. Sales is about eliminating choices. So having that mindset is pretty important. And I think really mastering a discovery call is also something that if you're new to selling, has to be on the top of your list of something that you can really do. Not so much for qualification, but that generally people start to decide and frame and think about you within 5 minutes of meeting you. So how you orchestrate the first 5 minutes is going to have great impact on your relationship going forward. So those would be two I would definitely focus on.
So, how do you think salespeople can improve their discovery calls? What are a few common mistakes that they make, or just simple things that they can do to significantly improve that?
Well, for one, I always say just don't focus your questions on things that the customer hasn't done yet or hasn't started. Like, when will you be launching this product? What would it be important to you next quarter if you save money here? What is your timeline for this launch? Those are questions in the future, and there's no truth to them. So the customer can answer that any way they want to basically manage the relationship. But the flip side is focus on people and what they've done. What's your favorite vendor? How much money did you spend last year on fixing this problem? How many people have you hired last year to be more efficient in this way? Like, ask people about things they've already done. You're going to get factual answers. Mm-hmm. So that would be one. And be very aware of the time. Remind people of finish lines. Don't enter a 15-minute discovery call with the thought that if it's going to go well, it's going to go over. If it's apparent to the customer that you're trying to get more than the allotted time, they'll shut down. So whatever your scheduled time is, fill it and close it and move on. Do not go 16 minutes. If it's a 15-minute call, even if they're interested, reschedule, do a new call. You're too busy. And that forces the discipline that you can manage the call better.
That's a really interesting point. And I think that also helps demonstrate scarcity, right?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, you always need to establish with your prospect that you are busier than they are, and by showing that you are a scarce resource, clearly that means you have some level of value in society.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So my last question for you is, beyond just salespeople, if I'm a startup or I'm a startup founder, what do you recommend I do or I have my salespeople do to be prepared to be successful and have fast growth? What's maybe the first thing or two you would focus on?
Yeah, I would say if I work with startups every single day, and usually what happens when a sales startup starts to build out a sales org, you've had a handful of high-profile logo wins, so you can start to kind of seed the market and establish that there's interest. But the challenge is that those early wins that you and your executive team probably closed are probably not indicative of what you want a sale to look like. You probably either discounted it greatly or had some kind of partnership associated with it because you had to get those early logos. But to think that that group is going to somehow be a domino for your next 50 accounts, it won't be. So the best advice is the oldest advice. When you are a startup, the only thing you should care about are the metrics around filling the funnel, which includes calls and responses and meetings and all those things that aren't a lot of fun to inspect. And yes, I'm saying quantity over quality, but yeah, you need massive activity to get that rocket ship launched. And you need to have salespeople get early wins so they believe that your product and service has legs to it. If they struggle in the first 6 months with your offering, they'll leave because they're not going to believe it's them. They're going to believe it's you.
You're
So
right.
you want to hit the gas hard with massive, massive volume and activity.
That's a really good point. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. This has been
Absolutely,
really
Heather.
wonderful. This is Jeff Hoffman from mjhoffman.com. He does sales consulting and advising and coaching. And I'm Heather Morgan with Sales for Startups and Salesfolk. Thank you. This video has been brought to you by Salesfolk and Sales for Startups. Visit us at salesfolk.com and salesforstartups.org. Thank you.